It's me, Mario. Super Mario 64 is one of the most influential video games of all time. You've heard it time and time again, this is the super amazing game that set the standard for all of 3D gaming. It's the sliced bread of the industry. But does it hold up to the modern day? Does it still stand the test of time? Does it deserve all of its praise? Well, yes, actually. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, you guys have read the title. Super Mario 64 is the best Mario game of all time. And I know a lot of you fellow Mario enjoyers may disagree with that because I've seen this game's reputation sort of change over the years. I mean, it's still loved for the most part, but there's more and more people voicing the opinion that the game hasn't aged well. The game is boring, or the 100 coin missions suck. Which is why I'm here to very aggressively explain why your opinion is wrong, and your taste in video games suck. Of course, I'm joking, you don't have to agree with this video, but if you don't like this game, then, you know, I might show up to your house, you know what I'm saying? So without further ado, make sure to punch the subscribe button and hit the bell, and without anything else to say, let's begin. How does one translate Mario into the third dimension? I mean, we can take the basics. He's a 2D platformer that has to go from point A to point B in these levels that are essentially gimmicky obstacle courses. That's the 2D Mario game formula. It's sweet and simple, but it works, and it works well. This point A to point B structure to a game was revolutionized by Mario in the second dimension, but it's now time for Mario to do the same with the third dimension. So what does he do? Well, the obvious answer is to just do it again. Do what worked in 2D, except for 3D. However, Nintendo had other plans. They didn't want to just make a one-to-one transition to 3D. They wanted to do much more. Here comes Super Mario 64.
Now listen! That's called motherfucking boy!
The way this game is structured is very different from 2D Mario, and it set the standard for not only just 3D Mario games, but 3D platformers as a whole. First of all, the structure of point A to point B obstacle courses are gone. Annihilated. Instead, Nintendo made sandbox-style levels that allows the players to move wherever they please. And their main goal is to get enough stars from each level until they can eventually fight Bowser at the end of the game. You see, the whole philosophy around Super Mario 64's gameplay is choice. The ability for the player to craft his own experience around his own decisions. Now, when I say that, your mind might go to something like Telltale's The Walking Dead. I'm not talking about that. Mario isn't making any life or death decisions. When I say choice, I'm referring to how the player has the choice on how to tackle objectives. There's decision making in all three of the big components that make up a platformer: movement, structure, and level design. Let's start with movement. When entering the third dimension, Mario gets a huge overhaul to his movement. He has the ability to run, jump, move around a 360-degree space, etc. However, there was much more added to Mario. Mario can now backflip, side flip, long jump, wall jump, ground pound, and the big one, triple jump. All of these moves were brilliantly designed and remains as the best movement system in a 3D platformer ever made. At least for the next 20 years, and we'll get to that in a future video. Regardless, the amount of opportunities you have to use these moves to complete objectives in this game is endless. You can long jump past all the platforming in Lethal Lava Land, side jump up to the ramp in Whomp's Fortress, maybe you can even do a backflip in Tick-Tock Clock for a more precise landing. The possibilities with Mario's moveset are, like I said, endless. And I mean that. This is where structure comes into play. When it comes to completing most platformers or games in general, the games are built in a more linear fashion. You complete level 1 and you get access to level 2. You complete one dungeon and you get access to the next dungeon, etc. This is done for a lot of reasons. For one, it is far easier to structure a game through linearity because you don't have to account for all the variables that may come up if you allow players to do whatever they want. But there's also some benefits that you can get from storytelling. If you keep a game linear, you can tell a more profound story, make scripted sequences that are a marvel to watch. Stories from games like The Last of Us could never work in an open world format. That story works so well because the linearity complements it. In an open-ended game, it's hard to script sequences because what if the player doesn't want to go where the game wants them to go? What if instead of continuing the story, the player just wants to go fight Ganon right off the bat? That's the struggle of linearity and openness. But here's the thing, this is Mario we're talking about. He jumps on the Goombas, he's the funny Italian man. Mario games don't need to tell a profound story. In fact, they never have. So why not sacrifice storytelling for a better game overall? That's exactly what happened. In Super Mario 64, you have the choice to tackle the levels in almost any order. The end goal of the game is to get 70 stars, and it does not matter how you choose to obtain those 70 stars. That's just how much you need to reach Bowser in the end. So in reality, you could complete every level and get every single star before the ending of the game. Or you could just do the levels that you want to do and skip the ones that you don't like very much. It's all up to the player. This game does not get enough credit for how it's structured, but none of this would matter if it wasn't for the level design. When you enter the level in this game, the first thing you'll notice is just how open it is. So much room to explore and do dumb stuff. The only objective being that Mario begins here in the level, and somehow, in some way, he needs to obtain this star. But how the player goes about doing that is completely up to them. To add another layer, there are multiple objectives in these levels, and you can tackle whichever one in whatever order. So you may be on track to grab one star, but then you end up getting distracted by another star, so you say, screw that, I'm a rebel, let's go get this one instead. This, paired with how open the levels are, creates a level design that has the player making decisions in every single second of gameplay. I don't know, am I gonna go over here and mess with that enemy so I can get coins for a star? Or am I gonna go over here and fly around grabbing other coins so I can get this star? Maybe I simply don't want to deal with the 100 coin mission anymore, so I grab this box, jump over this hill, and head into the pyramid to fight this weird hand boss that has eyes on his hands. Why does he have eyes on his hands? I don't know. I'm not here to question things. It's Super Mario 64. Beat that boss, get a star that way, or maybe I just don't like deserts, so I decide I'm gonna skip that level and go play Lethal Lava Land instead. Everything is up to the player, from how you get stars to how you traverse a level to which levels you decide to play to progress through the game. This game is an open book and it's brilliant. The game also doesn't fail to show you how to actually play it either. When you first start playing, you start out in a field in front of Peach's castle. All you hear is the birds and your footsteps. Not much to accomplish either. This is just an area that doesn't really serve much purpose at all aside from just walking around. But I think it's much more important than it may seem on the surface. When you first play a platformer, the first thing you need to get used to is the controls. Controls are what platformers are all about. It's all about using your movement to complete objectives or get to the end of a level. So, the game drops you into a random 3D landscape and allows the player to just simply move around. It allows you to get a hang of the controls before you actually start playing. You start climbing trees, doing backflips, triple jumps. You start learning what Mario is all about. The best part is that you don't even need a text box or an explanation. It just comes naturally to you by just fiddling around. The game also leads you into the gameplay loop in a smart way. The first level you play is Bob Battlefield. I am going to struggle saying that name. And I'm sure you've heard of how great of a first level this is by a million other video essay channels, so I'll try to make it brief. Basically, you got this very open map with multiple objectives for Mario to complete. The first objective is to reach the top of the mountain and kill King Bob. I fucking hate this name so much. However, the level is built in such a way that you are bound to run into another objective along the way. In the direct path that leads up to the top of the mountain, there's a chain chomp trying to attack you with a star behind him locked away. And it's really hard to miss, so most players playing this game will likely see this star on their first time playing the level. And as players tend to do, they'll probably try to find a way to obtain the star. The level designers knew exactly what they were doing. They are absolutely beautiful geniuses. I would kiss them right on the mouth if I saw them in front of me right now. They silently, without a guide or a waypoint, showed the player how to get distracted and chase other objectives. Which, if you remember, is one of the core parts of what makes this game's structure work so well. There's also some little things that contributes to this being such a great intro level. Like how there's not much dangerous platforming here. It's very safe. There's not many death pits, and every time you fail a jump, there's typically land underneath to catch you. It's a great intro level because it eases you into the game before making you do a cannonball. But then after you get your first star, the game opens up a ton by allowing you to go into any of the first 4 levels in whatever order you please. You got the first level, Bob Bomb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress, Jolly Roger Bay, and Cool Cool Mountain, all of which are fairly easy levels as you typically expect. But they also teach very different things. When you enter Whomp's Fortress, this is the first level where you actually have to competently platform. There's death pits in this level, and you will die if you don't platform accordingly. This is the first time where the game places a threat over the player's head, basically telling you, skill issue. Then you got Jolly Roger Bay, which is the first water level in the game. This level is always the most memorable because the soundtrack is literally peak, and I think everyone watching this video knows what I'm talking about. It starts off slow and peaceful, as it slowly becomes stronger and more adrenaline rushing as the song progresses. An absolutely beautiful track. Aside from that, it may not seem like a whole lot is being shown to the player through this level, but in reality, it's the first water level. And despite the negative reputation that water levels typically have, Super Mario 64 has quite a few water levels, and to be fair, none of them are that bad. So I think it's necessary for players to get an understanding on how the swimming controls work before heading into the rest of the game. And this is also the first sign of poor age. We'll get more into it as the video goes on, but Super Mario 64 did not age well in most of its aspects. The first aspect you typically notice is the swimming. The swimming is really clunky to control, and it takes a long while to turn around. It's also hard to point your camera at certain locations when you're underwater. At first, it's not a big deal, but as time goes on, the aging aspects do pile up, and it becomes a bit too much for some people who are playing the game. The next beginning level is Cool Cool Mountain, which is probably the most challenging of the beginning levels, I'd say. Because this level is all about taking risks. And verticality, because it's very large vertically, if you can tell. In certain parts of the level, you may need to use a cannon to launch yourself across a gap. And if you make the smallest mistake, it could result in your death. There's also other obstacles in your way, such as the mountain itself. The mountain isn't the easiest thing to climb. You're probably going to struggle traversing this level because there's no simple pathways. Instead, you have to problem solve and find ways to get around the level design to where you need to be. This is when it becomes very apparent that this game is all about problem solving. Now, you're not exactly solving puzzles like Legend of Zelda, but you are figuring out ways on how to traverse through these levels and collect stars. You're never really told how to get most stars in the game. You just have to figure it out yourself through problem solving. That in and of itself is kind of difficult, and we'll get into that later, but when it works, it is a killer formula. A formula to a platformer that is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. After you get enough stars from the first 4 levels, that's when you can head into the first boss level, which is basically an obstacle course for Mario to platform through. The way I like to think about these levels is like a 2D Mario level being translated into 3D. And I absolutely love these levels. It's no filler, it's just pure platforming. And sure, it may not have the freedom of the rest of the levels, but I still like it for what it is. It's a nice change up in pace. However, this is where the next sign of age becomes very apparent. Every time Mario jumps, he is locked on jumping in the direction that you pointed him at. There's not much air control to Mario's movement, and there's no flood or spin to save you from falling off. So if you jump forward, you better be ready to commit to that jump because there is no changing that destination. This is really annoying to a lot of new players, and I get it. Most platformers today allow you to adjust your jumps before landing, but for some reason, Super Mario 64 does not allow that. You have zero air control. So you definitely have a bit of a learning curve when you're getting into this game because it's not like most platformers. And then after you realize that the jump controls are kinda weak, you head into another aspect of the game that has not aged very well. The Bowser boss fights. Basically, the main idea of this fight is that you have to run behind Bowser, grab his tail, and fling him into one of the spikes off the edge of the platform. This is really really hard to do because when you're swinging Bowser, you're swinging him really fast and you have to somehow manage to time it perfectly. Of course, there's ways of getting around this, such as bringing him to the edge so that you don't have to fling him as far. But once you reach the end of the game, you have to do it from the middle, and that is really tedious. It's not the biggest deal in the world, it's not super challenging, but it's just tedious, dumb, and stupid. Not everything has to be a skill issue, sometimes boss fights are just not designed well. And that's the case for Super Mario 64, unfortunately. So yeah, the Bowser boss fights could have been a bit better. Now, once you complete all the levels on the first part of the castle, you can then go into the basement, which opens up an entirely new set of levels. All of these levels are fantastic, and I think they do a great job at slowly but surely increasing the difficulty. However, it's this part of the game, and especially when you enter the upstairs section of the castle, when you really get to see this game's age. This game is absolutely beloved by the gaming community, but a lot of people do not like Super Mario 64, or at least think it's inferior to the other 3D Mario games, solely because of its age. And look, as much as I love this game, it's kinda hard to defend it against these things. There is a list of things to go through, so let's just go one at a time. We already established the wonky swimming controls and the lack of air control when jumping. Now, imagine on top of that, the game had a bad camera. The camera is somewhat of a hassle throughout most of the game. The worst part, in my opinion, being this section on shifting sandland. Mario has to jump down on these platforms one at a time. However, you cannot see below you, and you sure can't move the camera to give you a better angle. You are stuck like this, guessing which edge to jump off of. Unfortunately, through my playthroughs, I had to memorize where to jump so that I land on the correct platforms. And I shouldn't have had to do that, and nobody else should have to either. But I've gotten used to it, it's not a big deal for me anymore, but for new players, I can imagine this part of the level being a headache. But guess what, we're not done yet. When you're trying to turn with Mario, he turns in a half circle. You can check this yourself by just pushing left and right while standing still. You will see Mario slowly going forward because the game pushes him into a half circle motion. This is not good because on certain levels where Mario has to be balanced on a thin board, you have to very carefully touch the analog stick because if you push too far on the right, Mario will do a full 360 and you will fall down. This is especially annoying on levels like Rainbow Ride, Tick-Tock Clock, and Tiny Huge Island. But hold on, the thing that can really hurt a first impression of this game is the vagueness of the objectives.
Okay.
Some of them are easy, you just have to go to the top of a mountain and collect a star, no big deal. But then others are trying to be mysterious, and I don't like that, man. I'm not with that mysterious type stuff, you know? Some of these objectives just make no sense. You might as well just search up a tutorial because why? What does this even mean? Secrets in the shallow and sky. What do you think you are supposed to do in this level? Well, if your answer is to touch this little box in the wall, then run over to this box, push it so that you can break this box, climb up to the top of the level and break this box, and then that box, then you would be exactly correct. Who is actually going to know to do that? And I don't care that it's supposed to be a secret. It's stupid and it ends playthroughs. This isn't the only level either. There's all kinds of levels just like this one. Or maybe there's stars hidden around the castle. Jump through Princess Peach's face to find a slide level to get a star. But you also have to play the level again and complete it under 21 seconds to get another star, because you're supposed to know that, you know? Or maybe you just need to talk to Toad, who is just standing there at random places. Alright, listen, Super Mario 64 is supposed to be a game where you play and turn your brain off. So nobody is going to stop and read these signs and talk to Toad. Alright, nobody's doing that, especially in this day and age. There's so many instances where the game just does not tell you how to complete an objective. One of the worst ones is Tick-Tock Clock. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Tick-Tock Clock. It is one of my favorite levels. But to obtain all the red coins in one of the objectives, you're supposed to stand outside the painting and wait until the clock hand is at 12 o'clock. Then you're supposed to walk into the painting. Upon doing this, all the platforms will freeze in place, thus allowing you to obtain the red coins. My god, genuinely, how are you supposed to know that? I understand that this game came out at a time where gaming magazines were a big deal and sharing tips on how to beat games were a big part of gaming culture. But we don't do that anymore in the modern age. I will say, to the game's credit, it is really charming to find these secrets. I remember when I was a toddler and my big brother showed me this level where you can just look up at the ceiling and suddenly you're in the sky. Like, that is really cool, and that's a great memory for me as a kid. That blew my mind. Like, that was amazing. But we cannot deny how poorly this aspect of the game has aged. It is a playthrough ender, and I can't blame anyone for not playing the game after realizing that they don't even know what to do. This game has not aged well at all. In fact, it's aged horribly. And right about now is when you start wondering, why am I criticizing this game so harshly if it's quote-unquote one of my favorite games of all time? Well, it's because, truth be told, I did not like this game. On my first playthrough, I struggled a lot with this game. I thought the controls sucked because I could not stop Mario from running off cliffs. I didn't like that I couldn't control Mario when he jumped. I wanted to be able to adjust my jumps midair, you know? I hated that I had to pull up a guide just to finish specific levels in the game. Oh, and the worst part, I absolutely hated Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Ride. Those levels, painful. They were stupid, dumb, the dumb. They're the hardest levels in the game, and I spent hours on both of them trying to get all of the stars, but I just kept on dying. I was miserable every time I died in these levels. I was cursing up a storm, calling Mario a big fat wiener loser. I had legitimate beef with Super Mario 64. I was doing personal attacks too. I was holding nothing back. I would spit on Mario and slap him around and tell him that Sonic Adventure was better than this poop water game he released. Sonic Adventure aged well. But why didn't this game, huh? Is it because it's bad? But eventually I pulled through and I 100%ed the game, even though it sucked the literal soul out of me. And from then on, I never really understood the hype surrounding this game. Literally every 3D Mario game is better than this one, except maybe Super Mario Sunshine. So then I went on with my life, played more Mario Odyssey, played some Super Mario Galaxy, but something was missing. Something didn't feel right about those games anymore. I noticed that Odyssey and Galaxy was too easy. But not even just that, but the structure also was lacking something I wanted. I started to somewhat miss Super Mario 64 and how that game was structured. Something about that game was just never replicated again. And one day, I came down with a sickness, a pretty bad one. So since I was stuck in the house, I decided to replay Super Mario 64, and not only was it easier than the last time, but I started to not care about the aging aspects. Even worse, I started liking the aging aspects I just criticized. Call me crazy all you want. I like the camera in Super Mario 64. I like how strict it is, while also showing you where you need to go. I like how Mario feels. I'll talk about this in a future video if I decide to make it, but I tried out a bit of Super Mario 64 Plus, which is basically a fan mod that fixes the controls, and I just didn't like it. I felt like it made the game way too easy and boring. The game started to feel like Super Mario Odyssey, and I may sound crazy for saying this, but I don't want the game to feel like Super Mario Odyssey. So every time I play this game, I play it vanilla with widescreen. No fixes to the controls, no fixes to the camera, just plain Super Mario 64. Because I want the original controls. The biggest evolution with this game is my love for Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Ride. These levels are now my favorite levels in the game because I just love platforming on these. I think the strict camera honestly makes it better. So I've grown to appreciate this Mario game, and in all honesty, there isn't a single Mario game that even compares to this one in quality. In my opinion, let me stress that. This game is not perfect, it is far from perfect. I think people need to realize that perfect games do not exist. I mean, I'll call a game perfect to gas it up, but in reality, there is no game that can't be criticized for something. Every game has flaws, but masterpieces do exist because a masterpiece isn't perfect. It's just a masterclass of work. All of my favorite games are heavily flawed, but I do not care. So with that said, despite everything I have talked about in this video, Super Mario 64 is a masterpiece to me. And I would like to hear how you guys feel about the game, whether you liked it or didn't like it. It's okay, we're all open to opinions here. Not everything has to be a battle. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and if you liked it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with the bell. I worked really hard on this video and I wanted to get it out to you guys because I saw the channel was having some early success, which is absolutely amazing. I hope some new viewers who are watching this video can hit subscribe because I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna keep making content like this, and I'm gonna cover the rest of the 3D Mario games. And maybe some other Nintendo content too, because I don't just play Mario. And with that said, I love you guys. I'll see you very soon with more content. Peace out.